Hamas did not emerge overnight, and it did not grow into power by accident. It is the product of decades of conflict, ideology, miscalculation, and despair woven deeply into the history of Gaza and the wider Israeli-Palestinian struggle. To understand how Hamas was able to rule Gaza, build an underground military empire, and carry out the October 7th massacre, you have to look beyond the explosions and headlines and into the long layered story of how a militant movement becomes a governing force. Hamas was born in the late 1980s during the First Intifada, a time when Palestinian anger against Israeli occupation was boiling over into mass protests, strikes, and clashes. While the secular Palestine Liberation Organization dominated Palestinian politics abroad, Hamas emerged from a different root, the Muslim Brotherhood. Its founders believed the Palestinian struggle was not only political but religious. Liberation, in their view, would not come through negotiations or diplomacy, but through armed resistance framed as a sacred duty. From the beginning, Hamas was more than a militia, it was an ideology. It combined social services, religious education, and militant action into a single system. In Gaza's crowded neighborhoods, Hamas ran charities, schools, and clinics, filling gaps left by poverty and weak governance. For many ordinary Gazans, especially in the 1990s, Hamas was not first encountered as a fighting force, but as an organization that helped families survive. This dual identity allowed Hamas to grow quietly while projecting legitimacy. At the same time, it built a military wing committed to violent confrontation with Israel. Suicide bombings, rocket attacks, and kidnappings became its signature tactics. These actions were framed internally as resistance, but they also hardened Israeli security policies and deepened the cycle of retaliation. One of the most controversial chapters in Hamas's rise is the role Israeli leadership played, unintentionally, in its empowerment. In the early years, some Israeli officials viewed Hamas as a useful counterweight to the secular nationalist factions of the PLO. Dividing Palestinian politics was seen as a way to weaken unified resistance. Hamas was underestimated, tolerated, and in some cases indirectly enabled until it was too entrenched to contain. Everything changed in 2006. Hamas won Palestinian legislative elections, capitalizing on public anger over corruption and failure within the existing Palestinian Authority. What followed was not peaceful political transition, but violent rupture. Hamas seized full control of Gaza in 2007, expelling rival factions in bloody street battles. From that point on, Gaza became a territory ruled by a single movement, operating with authoritarian control and little tolerance for dissent. Under Hamas rule, Gaza transformed into something unique and terrifying, a society above ground struggling with poverty and isolation, and a war machine being built below it. This underground system became known as the Gaza Metro, a vast network of tunnels stretching for hundreds of kilometers beneath homes, schools, and hospitals. These tunnels were not crude hideouts, they were engineered passages with electricity, ventilation, storage rooms, command centers, and launch sites. Fighters could move unseen, store weapons, and vanish after attacks. For Israel's advanced surveillance and border technology, this underground world became a blind spot. Hamas understood that it could never defeat Israel in a conventional war. Instead, it focused on deception, surprise, and asymmetry. Low-tech tools were combined with careful planning. Fighters trained quietly, communications were compartmentalized. Routine patterns were studied. Israeli defenses, among the most sophisticated in the world, were analyzed not for strength but for habits. On October 7th, that strategy reached its most devastating expression. Hamas fighters breached border defenses using simple but effective methods. Surveillance systems were neutralized, barriers were crossed. Israeli communities were attacked with shocking speed and brutality. Civilians were massacred, hostages were taken. For Israel, it was not just a security failure but a psychological shock. A state built on the promise of protection had been blindsided. The scale of the intelligence failure raised uncomfortable questions. Hamas had managed to prepare such an operation while hiding its intentions, exploiting assumptions that it was deterred or focused on governance rather than escalation. Deception, patience, and compartmentalization had worked. But Hamas's power does not come only from tactics, it comes from money. The organization relies on multiple funding streams. Some funding arrives through Qatari aid officially intended for humanitarian relief in Gaza but often diverted or taxed by Hamas. Iran provides military training, weapons, and financial support, viewing Hamas as a key part of its regional strategy against Israel. Beyond state support, Hamas has tapped into global fundraising networks, including cryptocurrency donations that move across borders with little oversight. This financial web sustains both governance and war. It pays fighters, builds tunnels, produces rockets, and maintains internal security forces that suppress opposition within Gaza. Perhaps the most disturbing aspect of Hamas's rule is its investment in ideology. From a young age, children in Gaza are exposed to messaging that glorifies martyrdom, demonizes enemies, and frames violence as destiny. Education, media, and religious institutions are tightly controlled. This is not incidental, it is strategic. Hamas understands that long-term survival depends on shaping identity, not just winning battles. In this environment, dissent is dangerous, political rivals are silenced, journalists are threatened, protests are crushed. Gaza under Hamas is not simply besieged by external forces, it is also tightly controlled from within. What makes Hamas particularly difficult to confront is that it is not just a military organization. It is embedded in the social and economic fabric of Gaza, its tunnels run beneath civilian life, its fighters live among the population, its ideology is reinforced through everyday structures. Any military response inevitably collides with civilians, creating humanitarian disasters that Hamas then uses to reinforce its narrative of victimhood and resistance. This creates a tragic loop. Hamas provokes confrontation. Civilians suffer. Anger grows. Hamas presents itself as the defender, and the cycle continues. The October 7th massacre did not emerge from nowhere. It was the result of years of strategic planning, ideological radicalization, financial support, and regional power games. It exposed not only Israeli vulnerabilities but the terrifying efficiency with which a militant ideology can transform an impoverished territory into a launch pad for mass violence. In the end, Hamas is not simply a group of fighters. It is a system of belief, control, and power. It governs Gaza not through consent alone, but through fear, indoctrination, and dependency. And as long as it remains embedded in the fabric of life there, any path toward peace will remain fragile, contested, and painfully distant. Understanding Hamas means confronting an uncomfortable truth that radical movements do not survive on weapons alone. They survive on history, grievance, miscalculation, and the slow erosion of hope.